Welcome everybody to the Thin Green Line. Wayne and I are very pleased to introduce our friend Ed Calderon on this episode. Ed started his career in Mexico and spent over a decade on counter-narcotics operations against the drug cartels before migrating to the north to educate and help protect our public on both sides of the border. Ed teaches survival preparedness, officer safety, personal safety from abduction, and is also an expert on cartel trends throughout the world. You've seen him on Joe Rogan, and now you're going to see him on the Thin Green Line. And check out this episode and hit us up with questions and comments after you've had a listen.
First of all, I want to say thanks for reaching out. Thanks for supporting Hidden War, because I had heard about you right before I went on Rogan, actually. When Hidden War dropped, I was in Missoula, Montana doing a book signing, and a radio announcer that was a Special Forces retired guy said, "Oh my gosh, man, have you heard of Ed Calderon? Have you seen him on Joe Rogan and the stuff he's talking about and the videos they're showing?" And I hadn't really heard of him yet. I went, man, somehow, some way we got to connect. And it was like a day or so later, you reached out. And then I went on Rogan after you had gone on about 3 months, and that kind of fueled the fire. And because that reach really helped both of us, it was really cool. But for our listeners and our viewers that don't know you, and they should, you had over 10 years of counter-narcotics work in Mexico, executive protection details from the special operations side, but became an expert in cartel organized crime trends, some of the stuff that are near and dear to both of us as they affect both sides, doing consulting, personal protection, evasion and escape, and all kinds of cool classes. I didn't get everything in there, but if you get, for the sake of our listeners, and anything I've left out, please do.
I've been basically did a lot of work in Mexico dealing with counter-narcotics. I was not a special operations guy, but I did work with a lot of the Mexican special operation forces. Basically, I had arresting powers and they didn't back then, so that was like my whole presence working with some of those guys. The amount of time I spent down there working both in the field and also as an instructor, and in the end, I was trying to figure out a way of having better trained, better equipped, and just more knowledgeable agents around me.
Right.
One thing you learn quickly down there is that nobody does it for you. All the things you wish somebody would do for you, they're not going to do it for you. Before I left, I was a regional sub commander. Basically, I had about 90 people underneath my command, and I just, once I got that responsibility, I figured to try and leave a better group of people than what I found, and that's what I did. Before I left, I had a lot of psychology majors, a few lawyers, sadly, and just very prepared people. And I kind of brought that into the civilian side of things when people started asking me questions about the type of training that would give them. They were kind of curious about it. I did executive protection work for a governor in Baja. I was head of his security, and I trained up their family members, just awareness, what to carry, how things work, on the surveillance and counter surveillance side and all that type of stuff. And they kind of told their friends, they told their family, and it went on from there. Eventually, I was kind of the guy that people went to for that type of training. And then eventually I just went into the US and started doing the same thing over there. And I didn't realize how much value the specific detailed experience I had down south was going to have in the US. Like how some of the stuff that I thought was common knowledge was really kind of new or out of the ordinary for somebody to talk about it up there. So that's kind of how
much so. Yeah, you were living it, man. And when you made the jump out of operations to consulting and training like you're doing now, did anything catalyze that down south, or was it just the time to go? Because you and I, when we first met, we had talked a little bit about that, and it's a fascinating story.
It's Mexico goes through cycles. Every 6 years, there's a new president that comes in, changes everything. Usually, every single security or policy that deals with managing the police forces down south usually changes every 6 years. So I was part of an effort to modernize and certify police forces in Mexico. Like, I actually had American certification through a association called CALIA, which is unheard of for police forces in Mexico to have such a certification. But we were one of the first ones to get it, and I think this day one of the only ones to get it. All that went away. We used to do polygraph testing every year or every half of a year. Backgrounds were checked, surprise house visits, all that good stuff, to keep us on the level. They want to have trustworthy people working. And so as long as everybody went through it, everybody was fine with it. And people sued the government because of it. And when the government changed, all those people that were let go or fired because of cartel ties, corruption, that type of stuff, all of them came back, right? So all of a sudden I was in a room with new leadership that were all on the take, and they wanted me to work for one side. And, I smiled. I said I was going to go to the office to figure things out, and I resigned that same day and left for the U.S. basically.
Wow, man. Kudos, brother. And it's so good to have you over here. And the interesting thing was when we first met, we started talking about this embedded cartel presence all throughout America that very few people seem to take seriously. And they're just starting to get wind of it, largely because of your reach and the stuff I'm doing. And thankfully to our mutual friend, Joe Rogan, of putting it out there and having an interest in it. And Wayne and I, as game wardens, we're always first and foremost about public safety, whether it's south of the border, north of the border. From a humanity standpoint, forget the boundaries of the border. But then our other passion, as you know, is that thin green line of conservation and wildlife and waterways and wild lands. And when I started to dive in on the special operations front as a game warden to fight these cartels coming up from south of the border, embedded all over the U.S., and doing some heinous environmental damage that people just didn't make that connection. It was a real eye-opener to people, and it still is. You mentioned, though, when we met, you were seeing that same type of stuff back in your home country, where carbofuran, banned poisons, being on tainted weed, waterways destroyed, and it was just like common practice down there. And those environmental effects, besides the public safety threat, are very, they're decimating. So if you could tell us a little bit about that, and then we're certainly going to want to dive into what you and I have been putting up on our posts and what Wayne and I have been discussing on other podcasts, the effects of COVID with the cartels, what they're able to do now, and how crazy that is, and we can share. So
So one of the interesting things is I started learning about your work and kind of taking a deep dive on your end, and I remember seeing some pictures of some grows in the U.S., right? And I showed some of those pictures to some friends of mine, and they're like, "Wow, where's that? Is that in Sierra Madre? Is that Michoacan?
Michoacan.
Is that Michoacan?" We're like, "Where is this?" And like, "Oh, this is California." Like, really? Yeah, some of this stuff is in California, and details about how they were using, basically how they run their irrigation, the chemicals that they use to keep their things green and not covered in the pesticides they use, basically, how they set up some of their overnight campsites, what to eat there, some of the cannery they leave behind, some of those dietary things are kind of indicative of where they're from, all that type of stuff. Like, I kind of started seeing and kind of looking at some of the stuff that was being left behind. And then on my end, I usually look at what happens around the area,
right,
as far as violence, as far as the presence of an organized criminal element in the area, any large or major busts around the area as far as moving things around. And then you quickly realize that cartels usually have a way of operating as a cell, as a group of cells working, right? So it's just like a virus, basically. A virus will affect the host in a very specific way. It starts off with the airways, and then it goes into the lungs. That's the same thing. They work in an area, and they start off basically building up a security element, building up a safe house type setting or place where they can move things and live, build up local connections with people that have ties back to the home country of Sinaloa, for example. So you see some Sinaloa specific communities out there that have all the cultural, religious traits, stuff like that around them, embedded in places where some of these grows are starting to pop up, or some of these grows have been going for a while. So you just quickly realize that they basically exported a methodology of making a living to the U.S. And it's been going on for a long time. And it's it's meth production. It's a lot of things, and now it's also the violence, And I think what a lot of people don't understand, it's a in a lot of ways it's an independent cell. It's not like people jump the border without any papers, go over there, those plants and grows, and run back with the money, go back to Mexico. That's not how it works. They're kind of embedded in the country now. The money stays in the U.S., which means that there's a thriving cartel nucleus or cell just basically living on the U.S. side now.
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's the most heinous reality for Americans to face. The more we talk about this, and that's exactly what we were seeing on the West Coast and in other parts of the country, all the way out to the East Coast where Wayne's at. Is no one's going back south unless they're deported as a deportable felon. And then if they're a tier 1 grower, or they're a human trafficker, or they're somewhere in that cell's organizational hierarchy of any value, it's a $4,000 to $7,000 price tag to get them across without a hiccup. We were, you and I haven't shared this, Wayne and I have, but we had arrested one DTO suspect, a grow boss, in multiple grows in multiple counties in multiple places of California over 20 times. And he was actually apprehended by some of our canines several of those times, and getting deported and getting back within a day or two, if that, just because he was so valuable. So, that says what's going on. That's kind of a statement to the level of how effective their organization is and how widespread it is. And that's only one we're catching out of all the ones we're not, It's fascinating stuff, but it's definitely something we're concerned on this side of the border, because that's an environmental hit. Every one of those grows, as you well know now, brother, is just decimating, because just a couple tablespoons of carbofuran in one creek, we're losing that waterway for miles, drinking water as well. And that's something we're trying to fight, and people are starting to take notice,
And just coming from my own experience and seeing how some of these guys operate, there's no measurements being done,
Right.
There's no measurements being done. There's no environmental study around it. They are basically, slash and burn type mentality, right? So, and also you see the effects it's having on consumers. There's a lot of people out there that are on the consumer side that think, they're just growing weed in the hills, and what's wrong with that? There's a lot of things wrong with it. They actually sometimes produce a very dangerous amount of chemicals in weeds meant for consumers that then gets mixed up with some of the legal stuff that is being grown out there or is being sold out there. So it's detrimental to everybody involved in that culture as well. It's not a single side issue. It's not. It realistically shouldn't be a politicized thing. And yeah, it's the mentality they have is basically slash and burn, right? So they don't care if they're going to dump in too much chemicals. They don't have a measuring stick. All they care about is producing an amount of weight, selling it, and then going back and making more. That's about it. That's all they care about. And if you get in the way of them and their ability to produce, eventually, violence. There's definitely money to be made. People are surprised by the fact that people are still illegally growing weed in these environments. It makes perfect sense. It's a market, and it's a market that grew exponentially when it was legalized in some places. And now, if you still grow it illegally, there's still a large profit margin to be made because you're not paying for a lot of things that normal regular growers are paying, and also you're not paying for the use of land, for chemicals to be put on the plant in a very specific way by a specialist. You're not worried about anything environmental. You're just producing a load of shitty, horrible weed up there in the hills, in detriment to the the wildlife and the land, basically. And there's still money to be made. People are surprised by the fact that cartels are still actually smuggling weed into the U.S. and now growing it in the U.S. Why? It's legal. Why are they doing that? There's still a large profit margin to be made by selling that stuff.
Yeah, big time. And we're seeing this in all of our messengers from followers, and in any of the education you're doing, I'm doing, Wayne's doing, is the idea, and I'll take my old home state of California as an example. We were about 4 years in deep with our marijuana enforcement team, our specialized unit, when Prop 64 was passed, which was the recreational, marijuana regulation law in California. All the medical laws tightened up, and everyone said, "Hey, you guys are going to be out of a job, man. You built up this team, you got training standards, you elevated, kind of like what you did down with your team, brother, and you guys are going to be out of a job." And we said, "Are you crazy? Do you know how lucrative this stuff is on the East Coast and Middle America, in the Midwest?" In states that don't have any regulation. And then our black market just doubled within a year of Prop 64 being passed, simply because what you just said, bro. This is really potent, high THC content cartel weed that had no overhead other than just getting it grown. No taxes, no environmental purity standards, no permits, none of it. Yet it's half or less than the price of a pound of dispensary quality weed coming out of California or Washington or Colorado. So we've seen a backlash. And when COVID started, especially, and talking to my teammates down there, and I want to pick your brain about what you're hearing on both sides of the border where you're at, it's open season right now. These guys know there's not a lot of law enforcement presence because of the pandemic protocols, because all of us as first responders are tied up on more immediate life and death situations in the urban areas. So the rural areas and those mountain countries for grows just aren't getting the patrol. And cartel groups' target of opportunity, they're just ripping and tearing on, both from Mexico and then within. And it's overwhelming our guys, and we're not even in the season yet.
Yeah. Another interesting thing to kind of add to all that, the synthetic cannabinoids coming out of China,
Yes.
that are kind of being added to some of the weird, shitty stuff that is coming out of the mountains. That is, and it's not a clean substance. It's the version. It's the fentanyl version being used for heroin, but now for cannabinoids, the synthetic cannabinoid oils and stuff like that being added. It's dangerous stuff, Again, people view this subject matter and immediately go to one side of the political spectrum, and I get it. But this stuff, the amount of damage they're doing, is, and and basically how it's feeding a growing presence in the U.S. That is now, struggling with a lot of issues. This is just another big one added there. Not a good deal for anybody on any side of the political spectrum. The effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and how cartels are kind of dealing with it. It's definitely something that's hitting them hard on a few fronts. Number one, and it's interesting how there's videos out there of some of the Sinaloa cartel actually enforcing curfews.
It's madness. I saw you.
They're running around, running around with a big board that says COVID-19 on it. So if you're caught outside during curfew, they'll hit you with that stick. Basically, they realize that first off, if people are kind of worried about, is the virus real? It's very real. Is it as bad as they make it out to be? I'm not a virologist. I don't know. I just see. I went to Baja, and I actually got a lot of time traveling during the whole initial stages of the thing, and I saw people sick with it. I've lost about 5 people that I knew from the virus. So it's a very real. And hospitals in Baja are overloaded right now. It's a very real thing. Cartels, how is it affecting them? Number one, it's affecting their ability to procure precursors for meth and the special ingredient they're adding into their heroin loads, which was one of their bigger money makers in recent years, fentanyl. And all that stuff and some of the chemicals they use for some of their production, all of it comes from China. China's going through a second shutdown in some places where they traditionally source some of these materials, right? So that's affecting their ability to produce product that then gets sent to the U.S., which has made them desperate in a lot of ways. They've been raiding and taxing any single chemical that they need to produce things like meth, and they've been scouring the land for fentanyl. There was a recent bust at the border where they were actually trying to smuggle fentanyl from the U.S. into Mexico.
Wow.
Because you guys reopened sooner than Mexico did as far as your maritime trade with China and as far as products. So the only way they could get fentanyl was through U.S. ports of entry. So somehow they got a big load of it, and they were trying to put it into Mexico so they can infuse their heroin and send it back up to the U.S., that's how desperate they are right now. You know?
Wow.
Another weird kind of element that people kind of are not seeing is cartels are diversified. It's very diverse. Most cartels are very diversified. A lot of their money actually comes from illicit or pirated merchandise, Chinese bags, Chinese products being sold in some small open air markets all over Mexico. Cartels actually tax these places for protection. So they're not making money. So the cartels are not making money, and it's a trickle down effect. So what is this producing? It's producing desperation, obviously. There's a lot of mouths to feed in some of these organizations, and there's no money coming in. So there's 2 ways that some of these groups are kind of dealing with it. 1, they're telling their guys to go home and wait. 2, they're taking advantage of this and actually investing in things like buying food for communities that are hard hit with the virus or with the shutdown, and feeding some of the communities around them to basically win hearts and minds, solidifying their position. And some of these some high production videos have come out from cartels, distributing food to some of the communities that they work in, and the federal government is nowhere to be seen. You know, openly, middle of the day, running around with AKs and delivering food to families that had sons killed by the same cartels. Which is kind of bizarre. But it's produced. I think this is what's going to happen, or it's what's happening. It's crippling one cartel that is very dependent on a very specific type of trafficking, which is the Sinaloa cartel, which is already fragmented in a lot of ways. It's already experiencing a lot of internal strife, and it has a leadership base that is kind of spread out between a few people. On the other hand, their biggest rival, the New Generation Cartel, is a single, cohesive criminal enterprise with a single head that is growing exponentially, ultra violent, ultra organized. It has, training camps out there. I know a lot of people were talking about ISIS training camps in Mexico and stuff like that. This is actually the real deal, and rarely see it covered in U.S. media. They actually have legit training camps for these people out there. And recently, counter narcotics operations in the U.S. side caught the daughter of the head of these, the New Generation Cartel, which led to an operation across the country that I'm not gonna say that I'm not going to say that it was futile as far as what they did, but I saw a lot of the people that they picked up and a lot of the individuals that were named on my side, talking to my sources. It was basically low-level distribution and movement of product, what you saw being kind of disrupted. But it was over 80, 90 people or something like that. That shows you, if they are low-level distribution, that means that there are at least, for 90 people, it's going to be, for 90 people that they saw, for each 10, you're going to see for each 10 or 20, you're going to see a single type of leadership nucleus out there. So there's a lot of, there's a saying in Mexico, there's hay muchos penachos para, debe haber muchos penachos para tan pocos indios. There has to be a lot of chiefs for so many Indians, basically.
Right.
So it means that what I take from it is it uncovers a growing organization in the U.S. with the newest, most brutal cartel in Mexico. So now you have Sinaloa cartel and the new generation cartel. So you have two large cartels growing in the U.S. unchecked in a lot of ways, dealing with anything and everything that they can to make money, basically. It's an interesting time to see some of the desperate movements some of these guys are making because of the pandemic, and it basically exposes a lot of the stuff they're doing. And people need to kind of look really deeply into all the stuff that's happening now. But I think with less people moving around, with less attention being put on anything that isn't COVID related, there's a lot of moves being made out there right now.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I mean, if you're looking at new generation, you're looking at Sinaloa that now they're gonna fight for territory and presence and dominance, in America, taking it north. Now's the time to make a move, right? It just makes sense that all of our attention is focused elsewhere, because they were doing pretty well before COVID too, and now it's just a thriving entity of taking that advantage. And I remember we were filming the first episode of the Thin Green Line pilot for Recoil TV in the middle of February, right before COVID dropped. And we were on an amazing 55,000 acre ranch in Southwest Texas, just across the border from Candelaria, when you're coming across for that little stretch of Rio Grande. So really widespread part of open border. And that's a big part of the story outside of conservation hunting for Aldad sheep. But while we were on that ranch, man, we were in one of the most beautiful spots of Texas I've ever seen from an environmental resource standpoint. And that's the game warden and me and Wayne coming out. But then at the same time, one hunting group across the ranch one day is getting into 10 traffickers with 100-pound bags of tainted weed coming up, right, to go through the distribution pipeline and bedded and headed north and headed east from Southwest Texas. And then we trip, we're on the other side of the ranch, guys with rifles and big backpacks. And we trip a border patrol sensor at Navy, thinking we're traffickers. But that meeting was really revealing to exactly what you're saying. The reason I'm bringing it up is when I talked to that pilot and we sidebarred and knew who each other were, he said, John, no one has any idea the depth of trafficking we have out of this one little sector, one little part of Texas, one little part of New Mexico. What's really happening at Juarez, and everything that you're speaking to, Ed, it was absolutely spot on. Just the hundreds and thousands of pounds of tainted weed and the methamphetamine and the people they were getting across, and getting about 1 out of 10 groups. We weren't even seeing a fraction of the number of operatives that were getting into America from that particular example, but it's overwhelming. And then the COVID issue, as you bring up, all these unprotected traffickers, we have no idea what exposure level they've got. So our guys are, being impacted with that from the standpoint of border protection, BLM, a lot of the people you and I have both worked with. And it's just something that alarms me. And like our mutual friend Joe Rogan said the other day in a message, we were dialoguing. He said, shit, man, I think the cartels are the next big super enemy of the US, and they're going to be the superpower of the world that we're going to have to deal with, like the Cold War. And I don't think that's too far off. Do you?
well, one thing, one weird angle that I think, and let's let me put on my tinfoil, hat, and
Helps with COVID.
yeah, yeah. Somebody. Well, I get a lot of questions usually, and this one, with the COVID epidemic and stuff like that, all of this tension right now between the U.S. and China, right?
Right.
And people speaking on the fact that there's a war with China looming, in our future. Like, what do you think about that, Ed? That's like, I think you've been at war with China for years, and you just don't realize.
Realize it. Yeah.
uh, war and wars are being fought all throughout the world in different ways and shapes. There's a lot of literature out there. I try and read what I can on the subject. I'm China and is not my forte, but my true forte is basically things that they do in Mexico. Chinese, there's no separation between Chinese criminal actions, international Chinese criminal actions, and Chinese state that I can see.
Right.
Things from triads, things from illegally produced cannabinoids, fentanyl, all that stuff coming out of China and Chinese laboratories is done in some way, shape, or form with full knowledge and support from the Chinese state. So you would think that all of these chemicals coming out of China, which is, you don't want to talk about Big Brother, they know everything about everybody. They work on a social point system, all this type of weird cameras everywhere. There's no way in hell that they don't know about all these chemicals going towards the neighbor of their largest global rival, right?
Right.
So if they have full knowledge of this happening and they're letting it happen, they're working on a weird, long-term conflict with the U.S. I think, talking about guerrilla warfare, like a new neo-guerrilla warfare, or pumping chemicals and pumping, conflict, pumping money, pumping all these things into a country that neighbors your rival to create instability, to put chemicals, to create a basic. So most of the fentanyl comes from China, and it's not very new, but it was a pretty recent thing, this whole epidemic you had with fentanyl. And all of it comes from China. I know everybody wants to go the cartels. It's the cartels. It's Mexico. It's the cartel. It is the cartels, but it's also China. It's also It's also Chinese state actors working to put drugs, to put the precursors in Mexico knowingly or letting it happen. Basically, that's another element to this that is pretty interesting. So I think what you're seeing on the border and what you're seeing in Mexico is part of something global. Definitely part of something global. If you kind of start piecing it together, you're seeing more Norinco branded rifles out there. You're seeing illegal mining operations happening along the Pacific side of the ocean. So you're seeing a lot of weird things, a lot of Chinese state actors kind of operating through different people in Mexico, creating this perfect storm. And now we have 75% of the mineable lithium ore on the planet in the middle of Sonora, right next to your, right next to the, right? Which was already sold off as far as mining rights to a Canadian company that was bought by a Chinese company. And this about an hour away from where the Mormon massacre happened. So you kind of add all these things together and you start scratching our head. And I worry about it. I worry about it both as somebody that's from Mexico and somebody that is making and working towards the American dream on the U.S. side with family on the U.S. side now. It's interesting how it doesn't really get talked about, doesn't really get exposed as far as some of these connections, what's happening out there, kind of on a global destabilization scale in Mexico, with obvious and clear ties to China.
I think that lithium ties it right together. And when they're making the car batteries, everything's electric, and making that whole switch. I mean, to have that deposit there is certainly an indicator that that's going to be the next illegal interaction, I think. So but that's very interesting that the lithium came up. I didn't know that, and I know that all our batteries right now, the ones that we use, are lithium deposits, because lithium is such a huge thing for batteries right now, and China is got the biggest market in that. Although I'm sure there's a company in Mexico that makes lithium batteries too, and where we're moving towards electric cars, and that seems to be the big pot of gold right now. And to have that sitting in cartel country, I think we're going to see some pretty interesting stuff come out of that, as I'm sure you think so too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's the next oil boom, and it's right across the border, and it's an interesting point. You talk about production of batteries in Mexico. I'm in a weird place as far as my identity. I'm from Mexico.
Yeah.
I moved to the U.S. I migrated legally to the U.S. I get called a lot of horrible names from people when I talk about some of these issues. But when I do, I talk about them, firsthand, basically. I don't talk about immigration as an outsider from immigration. I'm an immigrant. I went through the whole process. It's a very difficult process. It's a very complicated one. And when I talk about the wall, I talk about, close the border. I see all these things, and it's pretty interesting. Usually people that say close the borders probably never lived in a border town.
Right.
You go to San Diego right now and see how it's hitting some of the commerce and some of the businesses on San Diego side, and then cross the border and go to Tijuana and see how it's affecting some of the business on that side. There's a symbiotic relationship going on there.
No doubt.
Mexico is the second largest consumer of American products, next to Canada. So our economies are tied, and the wall. We get a lot of talk about the wall. It does work in stemming illegal immigration, which it in and of itself, and this speaking from somebody that put a lot of people smugglers away and found a lot of the things that they actually do to people when they try and move them up towards the border. There's a lot of rapes that happen there. There's a lot of murders. A lot of people get robbed. A lot of people get used. Slavery is alive and well in the United States, and it's linked directly to smuggling people across the border, from sexual slavery to other types of slavery. So there's a lot of reasons why that border wall will work to fight against some of that type of stuff. Also, just people risking their lives crossing a vast stretch of desert. Who knows how many bodies are out there of people just succumbing to the elements. That's one side of the issue. The other side of the issue is security. Is it stemming the flow of drugs into the U.S.? Well, traditionally, where the border wall is mostly built up, is where a lot of the drugs actually go through. Ports of the Tijuana border area, a lot of drugs get through there, usually through tunnels or other means. So there's definitely an argument to be said that border walls work for some things, but not so well for others. I think having trained and worked with Customs and Border Protection agents, seeing some of their needs from both sides of the fence, they need more resources as far as manpower and technology. I think is where they're kind of lacking. They're the perfect villain for the type of people that hate me. Oh, Border Patrol agents, Ed. You're like, how can you work with them? You're an immigrant yourself. You're from Mexico. How can you, speak to I've seen Border Patrol agents out of their pocket go and buy toothbrushes for kids.
Yep.
Oh, they put them in cages and shit like that. So first off, and this family separation, that's been going on for a long time, right? Coming into the country illegally, I didn't come into the country illegally. You get arrested for anything, you get separated from your kid. That's just what happens, The kid is actually safer, healthier than he would be out there in the hills on the Mexican side, waiting to get across, right? Okay. But it's one of those things. People should kind of before they kind of give an opinion on that type of stuff. I wish I could take them on a safari tour to some of the immigrant camps down south, and ask them where would you want a kid to overnight? It's a pretty horrible situation all around in that area and in the border area. You'd be surprised as far as what type of shenanigans happen on both sides of the border if you've never been there. It's not uncommon to see full armed incursions of armed men from cartels into the U.S. Guys with AKs walking into the U.S., delivering something and walking back, and on the U.S. side having the same thing happen on the U.S. side, because they work on both sides, right? Also, a lot of people are expecting these guys with cowboy hats, pointy boots, Mexican dudes. Actually, they're working in conjunction with biker gangs now on the U.S. side.
Wow.
So you're going to see a lot of Caucasian people sometimes working with them in conjunction on the U.S. side. You'll see blonde ladies picking up merchandise, picking up loads on the U.S. side. I say this because we actually, on the Mexican side, we would see from afar some of the activities that would go on around the border, and we would just get freaked out by, soccer mom with a
right.
soccer mom with like a little backpack that was hiking with two kids, like through the hills, would just lean down, move a rock, and just pick up a brick and put it in her backpack and walk off, And you would see this, and you're like, Yeah. What connection could she have to the cartels because of her ethnicity? And then you kind of like figure things out later on. You see they have links to biker gangs in the U.S. Or other types of groups of that nature, which is now you start seeing that kind of. It's always been the case, but you see that connection in some of these places. So, it's a rowdy place, that border.
Yeah. Hey, Ed, something after watching all your Rogan shows, reading all your articles and everything like that, I just kept forming questions. And when you talked about the bravest man in Mexico, I could tell you have a little reverence there to the lieutenant colonel. I kind of want to know where you came from, and to take that step to come to the U.S. when they wanted you to join the other side. I mean, it says character to me, and I just kind of want to go back to your beginnings and how you developed that character and that type of thing, that you didn't go over to the other side. You didn't do that. There has to be something there. And I think that's something you can share with everybody, that, especially we get a lot of young kids watching this that want to be game wardens or want to be in law enforcement. And just character just comes out when I'm listening to this, watching you talk, and the manifesto thing, that's your belief. That's what you want to do. This is I want to change something. And that just says so much about your character. Can you bring us back to how you developed and the choices you made?
Sure. So I'm no saint at all. working in Mexico as a cop, shady shit happens. It's unavoidable, you know.
Yeah.
It's part and parcel of the culture down there. But there's a difference between working in that environment and picking a side, which is exactly what a lot of people that go into that line of work do. What I mean by picking a side is usually you'll see outside. Even when I was in the going through training, every now and then you would hear somebody being called out, and they would step out of formation, and then you would never see them again. Later on, you would hear rumors of why they were taken out, and usually it's because they had an FBI background check. All of us went through FBI background checks. And something came up where they were part of a smuggling operation of some sort, or cartel connected in some way, so they got kicked out. So that it's always been the case where they try to infiltrate our group and groups like us with some of their guys. Then later on, you would see guys approach us with money, basically. This is for you. Leave me alone, and there's more of this. All I need you to do is just leave me alone. Main thing that we learned early on: once you get into somebody's pocket, there's no way to get out of it.
Yeah.
When I graduated from the academy, my dad was there. My dad is the biggest pacifist on the planet. He doesn't, never raised a fist in anger, doesn't understand what went through my head when I decided to do this type of work, completely to the opposite side of the spectrum of everything I kind of became. But he gave me some of the best advice, don't let anybody own you, Ed, basically, was the thing. Once I got through training and went out there, I experienced right off the bat the realities of the work that it was in. Two of my friends were picked up outside of a hotel and executed horribly in the span of a few hours. The shootouts with people that were armed in a very superior fashion with very superior numbers were a constant. And you would look to your sides and you would see people that were there, and you would see people that would run away or not be there. And then you would look towards your leadership and the people that were there to kind of guide you along this suicidal endeavor. One of the faces and voices that I heard early on from my training and then later on outside was Lieutenant Colonel Lezaola. I actually got to experience his transition from being tasked with heading up training and then going into being the director of the organization that I was a part of. He was a graduate of the War College in Mexico. A lot of rumors and nobody knew what to make of him. He was it was one of those supernatural humans that you find in life. He as a director, he would go out into formation with a bunch of young dudes. I was 21 when I went through training. Skinny, sunburnt, no hair, and he would taunt us by doing just push-ups in front of us. See how much he could gas us. So he very much led by example. He was a badass. He was also very direct, honest, harsh individual. My first executive protection job and my first bodyguarding job was with him. Basically, he looked around the room. He looked around the room and said, "Ed, since I have a pretty weird, unique name for Mexico, people remember it. So, Ed, yeah, you know how to drive?" I was like, "Yeah, awesome. Get in the car." So, my first executive protection job was driving him around Tijuana, supervising operations, basically.
Wow.
And we would go to places. So the way things worked back then, you would get anonymous reports, or you would get any sort of suspicious activity reported to Central, and nobody on the municipal police side would respond because they were in on it, or they just didn't want to get killed. And the only guys that would go there was the operations group, which I was a part of. So I would hear these reports coming in, and Lieutenant Colonel Izzola would say, "Well, let's go over there." Okay, so go over there.
Run to the bullets, man! Run to the bullets. Let's go.
Leadership. Lead from the front, basically. He despised straps, carry straps on his rifle. So he would carry his rifle in his hand like a gun, because that's who he was. He would go in and interact with some of the detainees, kick doors down, that type of stuff. It was crazy. But he would say, don't ask anybody else to do what you can't do yourself. So he was very kind of influential in the way I did things later on. There was one day he said, raise your hand if you want to, be a hero to your community and make a difference and be recognized for your efforts. Just raise your hand. And a few people raised their hands. I was on to him, so I didn't raise my hand. I was like, shut my mouth in the corner. And then he said, okay, all those that you raised your hands, get the fuck out of here. I don't want any of you. Like I need villains. I need people. I need villains, basically. He said, I need people that are capable of fighting the type of people that we need to fight. So I need villains. I don't need anybody that want to showboat. I don't need any individuals. I need a group of villains to basically fight villains. We don't fight. We need to fight fire with fire, and that's what he made. He made a group of villains, basically. And as a villain himself, against the cartels were. He's one of the only individuals that I can recall in recent history in Mexico that was feared. This guy was feared by the largest criminal groups on the planet at the time, and that is unique in and of itself from this guy. He kept a pretty he ran a pretty tight ship. Everybody was suspect to him, so but he was very influential in my kind of way of thinking and my upbringing in that line of work. I think if he wasn't there, I don't know where I would be. Probably a lot of us, kind of call back to that time when he was in charge, and kind of remember it fondly for how much we were feared because of him. Right.
Wow.
And
Ed, what a mentor to have, I mean, like Wayne said, it speaks to your character, but we all need those mentors. And I know we had them in our career, but what a legitimate guy, man, actually feared by the cartels and leading from the front, like all good leaders do. And you followed in his footsteps, and it's beautiful to see, and kudos to everything you're doing now to educate and really trying to make a difference out there, man. It's amazing.
And he's currently running for the mayor of Tijuana, or is that over and done? Or
he's on his third attempt. They tried to kill him many times, many times. There's some people out there that have trained with me, and sometimes I do classes where we kind of sleep over during the night in some of the sites we're training. I disappear at night and go to sleep somewhere where nobody knows where I'm gonna sleep, and that is directly influenced by how he would kind of manage. First time I stayed at a hotel. First time I stayed at a hotel with him, he said, "Ed, what room are you in?" 204. Okay. He took his card, his suite. Now you're in room, 205.
Great.
I grabbed it, and
you've been branded.
Yeah, he was like, "Now you're right," and it was interesting. He said, "Never sleep where they think you're gonna sleep," right? So, that was kind of interesting, and I learned from that. He got a lot of attempts on his life. The last one took the use of his legs. He was coming off being head of police in Juarez, and he was shot in the back by a former Juarez police officer that was sent there. It took the use of his legs, but man, the only thing they did was this create. He like when that happened, everybody was like, first off, you worry about the guy, of course. But then he was, posting pictures of him, standing up with his arms, like I can still do things, And he said, well, I'm gonna have to fight him some other way. So he went into politics. So, yeah, I've been helping out with his campaign for the past 2 campaigns he's had. After I went on Rogan, he gave me a shout out through his social media, which is the only time in my life that he has ever acknowledged my existence outside of staging hotel rooms with me. So
I guess you made the ultimate cut then, bud.
Yeah. Gave me a compliment. Now, a few friends from back in the day like reach out to me like, what the, what? Like,
And I was thinking drivers had a special relationship with the guys they drove, and
right.
I'm thinking you guys became friends, and yeah, I guess that didn't happen.
No. A weird thing that I had that not a lot of people had, language skills were part of the work that I did. So I got a lot of people think that I've been speaking English my whole life. That is not true at all. I understood it. I could speak it brokenly, but actually I went through language training for some of the work that I did, and started eliminating some of the accent. Went to the U.S., trained in the U.S. As well. Went through some training on the U.S. side. So I was the guy, the guy that could speak English. I was also the guy that was tech savvy. And I was also the guy that knew how to buy gear on the U.S. side. So every now and then I would show up with a new piece of gear. You would look over at me, like, oh, that's a nice vest. Yeah. How much was it? Oh, this much. Okay. So you can buy another one, right? It's like, yeah.
Start shopping.
You immediately realize you had to buy 2 of everything. That's about the only interactions we had usually when it came to equipment. I tried to sell him on a 2-point sling, and he refused. He refused. Right? Maybe he knows something I don't know. I don't know.
No, I think that was a great relationship forged, and I think you got a lot out of it. Yeah. When I watched you talk on Rogan, when his name came up, your demeanor changed. So I guess that's maybe part of our police training and interviewing techniques, which I just that's what I really like to do, is to dig in there and find those cases that are hard. So I just like that man had a big impact on it. And then I start looking at your character, and the other thing that comes up when you left that meeting and headed for the U.S. That just says there was something in place to do that, or was that a knee-jerk reaction? I mean, my gut tells me that you had a plan. You had a bug-out plan.
I did. You always do. That's
always should.
Again, some of the
right, John?
some of the training, yeah, some of the training, some of the training, and some of the just the basic culture. Because it was a culture. That job and the people that was in there was a culture. We had everything set to run, basically, right? So things like keeping cash on hand, having a bug out bag or just a bag to run already made. All of us used to carry around, change of clothes in the car. We kept our passports and any sort of travel documentation up to date. Like I had Sentry had Sentry pass. I had my passport. I had my visa. I married an American, but my aspirations to become an American were not even close to where I was. You know, I was working. I was needed where I was. It was a career for me, and I was there. You know, I was in it. Luckily, during that time working down there, I made a lot of connections with a lot of people on the U.S. side. I was part of a very great group of people that went to Coronado a few times and actually trained out there at the naval base with some very special people. This coming off the whole Zeta debacle, so it was a pretty big deal that they actually let us in there and actually let us into some of the skill sets that they showed us.
That's huge.
Some of the friendships that I had and forged when I was there, you know, are still kind of here. So when the whole change happened, a lot of the people that I worked on the U.S. side with were kind of keeping tabs on me, and they realized that the change was coming. So a lot of the liaison work I used to do and stuff like that, I told them, like, if you receive a call from that work number that I gave you, yeah, just realize it's not me anymore. It's these people, and I have nothing to do with them. And, you know, just on the record, I don't trust these people. Yeah. So they said, well, a few of them actually offered their homes, which again, goes back to the whole, Americans have a very, very specific altruistic and honor-based kind of upbringing, specifically in the military branches, that I have yet to encounter out there in any other culture. And a lot of them actually offered to open up their houses and their homes to me and my family when I made that jump. And well, that's what I kind of in the span of a few probably like 24 hours, my whole life was in my truck and I was across the border.
Wow.
And starting my process, starting my immigration process within 48 hours, basically. I made the mistake of, well, not the mistake, it was just in the environment. When I was doing my immigration process, it was right around the time that Trump got elected. So the wait time was exponentially longer, you know, for the whole process. Because everybody made a rush for it. But interestingly enough, I stayed in a kind of a military community for the time that I was initially there in the U.S., and very conservative community around me. And so I got to experience that side of it, and also got to experience the more liberal side of California as well. So my new American experience, you know, was very politicized on TV.
Right.
You know?
Oh yeah.
and both sides were trying to convert me to their side. You know, you're an immigrant from Mexico, don't support Trump. And the other side is like, it's fine. You know, you're here, you're fine. You're legal. It's great. Don't worry about it. So you got to see both sides of the argument. You know, eventually, it just led me to the whole. You know, I just want to be able to, you know, go to my best friend's gay wedding and be able to carry a gun concealed. That's about it. You know, if I can do both, you know, fine. It's been a weird time to try and become an American, right? It's definitely been an experience. But I know what hunger is. I know what not being able to trust anybody around you at work is. I know what being hunted is like. So when I'm in the U.S. and I'm, you know, training and talking to some of my law enforcement agent colleagues on the U.S. side of things, you know, I try to be very vocal and adamant about the fact that some of my realities back then could be some of your realities in the near future or now.
Yep, absolutely.
I didn't get a pension. I didn't get a send-off party. I didn't get anything, not even a pat on the back from the job I did down there. So my whole kind of mindset right now, and part of the purposes of the whole Ed's Manifesto project is to make it worth it. A lot of my friends got killed down there. A lot of my youth was injected into fighting a war that is still going on down there, and a lot of it was, now that I'm standing over here, a lot of it seemed like a lost cause, and I just want to make that experience, worthwhile for people. If that's why I'm very passionate about sharing some of this information, some of the experiences I've had, and to give a voice to the people that I work with, because the weird part of me is that I can speak English in a conversational way, and I had the experiences I had, and you'll hear a lot of voices coming out from down there that did what I did. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah,
No, it's very
it's awesome. It is very unique, and it's awesome, Ed, because it's not about just Mexico. It's not about the U.S. It's not about border control or the immigration debate. It's really about humanity, man. And that's the message you're putting out there to keep people safe, and that we all admire. And to go back to what you mentioned earlier on the immigration debate, we've never had an anti-immigration message on any level of anything we've done on Thin Green Line protections, as you know, when you and I met. And we don't have an anti-cannabis message even. We have a health and human safety message and a preservation of our environmental resources message that goes everywhere. Forget the border, take it out of the equation. And man, all the experiences you had down there just personifies exactly what we see on the dark side of all those issues and how they can be politicized. And it's cool to see it being more universal and not segregated to one spot.
Yeah, specifically the subject of public lands. The U.S. it doesn't know, Americans don't know how amazing they have it.
So true, man. Take it for granted too.
I mean, Mexico is a pretty wild place. I've been in some pretty amazing places in Mexico, but we don't have a conservation culture, and
No.
The amount of slash and burn, and the amount of places that I used to go to that you go to now, and they're gone. Right? It's just disheartening. And then you go to the U.S. and I was in Yosemite a few months ago. And I was looking around, and this is the simulation. This can't be.
Yeah.
This can't be real. Like how is this here? Like, why aren't there a bunch of houses,
right,
in this area? And it's I view it as a gift, and not and it's not my gift. My kid's American, and seeing things through those eyes, I'll never get to see what those eyes are going to see in the future. But I want to have at least what I saw when I was standing in Yosemite to be in her future, if I can. That would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is we're just trying to preserve some of that, for everybody. Forget about those border issues. And when you mentioned Mexico, and I shared this with you when we met, and you mentioned Baja, and I think of the slash and burn mentality down there that I certainly saw, but I absolutely love the country and my friends and my family, and we have a Baja race team down there, and I shared with you the orphans we support and the community, to try to change the tide, if you will. And old Baja is just gorgeous, man. There's some remote areas still in Baja that are just semi-untouched, that I've been on an ATV without any support, hundreds of miles from anybody. And I just shut the engine off and look around and go, I could be in the Anza-Borrego Desert right now in San Diego County. Or I could be like in the plains of Utah. It is such a gorgeous country, and it's a bummer to see some of the rip and tear you mentioned but there's so much down there that is beautiful, you know, the people first and foremost, and then the more remote Baja terrain that I miss every day, you know. And we just hope to see some of that last, and if there's any hope for some calming of the calamity down there, if you will, that more people can enjoy it, you know, the next generation coming up here as well.
Yeah, there's two places in Baja that I would recommend people go see. One of them is El Picacho, where the observatory is. That's probably
Yes.
right. There's
Yep.
there's wild flying California condors up there.
It's awesome. Yeah.
They look like planes. If you've never seen one of those in the wild flying around, that was pretty amazing. It's a pretty amazing place. It's a weird place because you wouldn't expect high Sierra pine in that part of Baja, but it's there. You can stand on a clear day. You can stand on top of the observatory and look at the Pacific Ocean on one end and look at the Gulf of Baja on the other. It's a pretty amazing place. I know that place a lot because we would, you know, chase down drug planes in the area.
Right. Of course.
But it's a pretty place. And if you go further south, down to Baja Sur, there's a place called Cabo Pulmo, which is basically a tropical coral reef. Right. I mean, you just go into the ocean and stick your head underwater, and it's an insane, like, it's like a Disney cartoon down there. Like the amount of colored fish, whales. It's just a weird, supernatural place there. They're starting to build hotels near there, which is disheartening. But yeah, there's definitely some amazing places out there if you make your way.
No doubt, no doubt. So Ed, I just want to thank you a lot for coming on. You know, certainly sharing all that stuff, because it's very different for me being on the East Coast. Being my border's Canada. I know on one of the Rogan shows, I think you were talking about smuggling, that the coyotes were now sending them on planes, and they were walking through the Canadian border, and that's my country, and I worked very close with Border Patrol up here. So that was my connection. But to bring what you talk about into my reality, you know, is something special, and I really appreciate you coming to the U.S., sharing your story, and taking a stand and trying to make a difference, because there's not a lot of people that do that. I really appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you guys for inviting me on. I get the whole, Ed, aren't you worried about the cartels knowing about you and then them coming after you? If I was worried about that, I wouldn't have gone into law enforcement in Mexico for 12 years, right? Is it a worry? Yes. But I don't know. I don't owe anybody anything. I never took anything that wasn't mine. I never worked for any side. And my background has been, you know, I've been around people. I've worked with the people that I've worked, and I'm more worried about the whole effort that I had down there not being worth anything and nothing coming out of it.
Right.
That's what keeps me up at night. I'm not scary men waiting to, you know, hunt me down. I'm not particularly. I don't speak about anything that I don't know about, and I don't speak about anything that isn't verified or that isn't part of something that is kind of open source, right? So, you know, I get that question a lot. You know, aren't you worried? I think anybody that's ever done anything that's worth doing will usually create enemies out there in the world, and
Inevitable,
that's just inevitable. The difference between most of my law enforcement agent friends in the U.S. or some of my military friends from the U.S. is most of the enemies that I made were, you know, lived pretty close to where I used to live. And then there's a lot more of them. And, you know, again, you have no idea how good you have it in the U.S. When it comes to some of your law enforcement professionals, some of your wildlife professionals, and keeping that preserved for your kids. There's a lot of things you have going for you, and I think I don't know. I think it should be obligatory for American youth to travel to other parts of the world to see how the other side of it lives, so they can appreciate that a bit more. But yeah, it's it's been an amazing trip, an amazing experience, and I'm just glad to have ended up on the U.S. side. That's about all I can say.
No, man, it's great, and I like your point. We really appreciate your point. If the X generation, all of the next generation of kids could sit in Mexico for a day, or go overseas for a day, what an education lesson of appreciation. When we're trying to drag some of them out to enjoy the outdoors. And man, we really appreciate you being on, and great to see you again, brother. And healthy through COVID, and look forward to talking again. But it's been great. Thank you so much for being part of our Thin Green Line.
Thank you.
It was an honor, Ed.